Turn. All right, great. Right, now that we're streaming, you're going to behave yourself a bit, huh, Gary? All right, well, good morning again, all. Welcome to another snowy Sunday morning. Haven't had enough of those this winter yet, have we? It's like in the summer when we get rain every Tuesday nights for church league softball, and it just keeps hitting every Tuesday night. Like the weather's on a 7-day cycle too. But again, we're looking at embracing our Lutheran identity, looking at some Bible passages and history things to remind us of why it's important. And today we're still in the early church and you chapter. Which this is one of the points where it may seem like it doesn't really, most of you might not just spend your time thinking about, oh, how does the early church apply to me? But here we'll see some of the ways that it actually does. Beginning with, again, so we made it into, so we're still in the early church, but we've made it to the 300 ADs, which is when, after Constantine, the Christianity is legal in the Roman Empire. So instead of being a persecuted religion, it actually becomes a state religion. Now, we talked last week a little bit about some of the pros and cons of that change, that, yes, you're not being persecuted anymore, but now you've got people who go, oh, well, I need a government job, then sure, I'll be a Christian, but, how much faith do they actually have? How fully committed are they? Versus when you're persecuted, you have to be pretty committed to, say you're a Christian. But again, once the legalization of Christianity happens, then Constantine and some others figure out, oh, wait a minute, not all the Christians believe all the same things, because they've all been in these persecuted little patches and haven't been able to dialogue with each other and compare and talk. And so, well, let's get them together to do that. So again, after the legalization of Christianity, it became clear not every Christian agreed and believed the same things. Some were simple misunderstandings, and we get to some of that, and some of that, as we go through church history, it's sometimes more language than necessarily theological things.
That hasn't changed today.
Right? Yeah. But see, we don't have heretics anymore. We just have different denominations, and so, yeah, if you don't, you're not. I don't agree with what you're teaching. Well, there's another church down the block, and see if you agree with them more. All right, so one major disagreement was over who Jesus is and how Jesus is. And this we kind of might have talked about a little bit. So is Jesus a created being? Or is he God in the flesh? And how does that all work together? And this became one of the first big questions that they're talking about. And they were talking about other issues too, but this was kind of the big one. Who Jesus is and how Jesus is, essentially, how his two natures work together. And the two main groups, so one group is called we call the Arians, after a guy named Arius, who ends up being kind of the main proponent of this. So Arians believe that, well, God chose Jesus to be our sacrifice and raised him from the dead, and he can be understood as the Son of God, that Jesus is essentially human, not divine. So Jesus is still pretty important, but he's not fully divine, or that he's the created being, that he's not eternal like the Father. He has a beginning. Yeah, Gary.
So when is this? How much of our Bible did they have then?
And so that's part of what's going on. Again, this is the Council of Nicaea 325, and then they meet again in 387 to formalize things. And they have the Bible. So New Testament's written between, say, 40 and 100 AD. There's going to be some debate on some of the dates, but that's essentially what it is. And there's some other stuff floating around too. But you've got the Council of Nicaea isn't The Da Vinci Code conspiracy theorists say this is where they set the canon and, cast out the Gospel of Thomas and the Gospel of Mary and all that stuff. But it's really was more of a recognition of, oh, these are all the books that we're using, so this is what we draw from. So it wasn't a set thing. So they had the Bible like we had. Again, no printing presses yet. None of that, so it's not like everyone's got a copy of the Koine Greek Bible and the Septuagint, which is the Old Testament in Greek, that they can just pull up on their, ancient iodophone and be able to check on things. I mean, there was an office in the early church called the lector. That's what we call, the fancy church word for the people who read. In the early church, the lector was the person who A, could read, which wasn't all that common, and B, was the one who then kept all the scrolls. Because especially if you're meeting in a house church or moving from place to place, okay, he's the guy who's got the scrolls and codexes and things with him, so he guards and keeps them safe, and that's probably the only copy the church has. So they have it, but it's not necessarily as easily accessible as we do. And even, we'll kind of just stay kind of 10,000 foot view. We won't necessarily get into the nitty gritty of things, but some of the Bible passages even that we use to talk about these things, part of it's we can agree what passages they are. The disagreement is the interpretation. So.
How many years after Christ was crucified does all of this take place?
All right, so Council of Nicaea is 325 AD. Jesus is crucified usually between 30 and 33 AD is the guess. That there's a little disagreement over what year exactly it was. But so 300 years after Jesus. And there's been some people in the early church, like is Irenaeus and Polycarp are two early 2nd century church leaders who talk about how they were mentored by John, the disciple, the gospel writer, everything. So there's some direct connections through student-teacher relationships to the disciples still at this point. So it's not that long, but again, they're figuring out, and Jesus Jesus talked about how he's God and talked about how he's human, but then they're trying to have to figure out, well, wait a minute, how does this work? All right, and so what difference does it make to our salvation that Jesus is God in the flesh?
Well, just another human sacrifice isn't going to pay for everything.
Right. Yep. Yeah. So if Jesus is just human and dies, well, humans die all the time. That doesn't change anything. Right. Okay. Yeah, Connie.
Now, what is the attitude, maybe you've answered this question before, of people who are Jews? Jesus, because they don't believe in Jesus, that Jesus is God.
Well, I mean, so you've got the Jews who are remaining Jewish are generally just going to see Jesus as a rabbi, right, but not divine.
And isn't that also how Muslims?
And that's how Muslims, I mean, there's no Muslims yet. This is still 300-400 years before Muhammad. But yeah, that's how Muslims see him too, that Jesus isn't divine. He was just a prophet. Another prophet. Right. Yeah, and they go through all these then, convolutions too about how Jesus didn't actually die on the cross. It was some, dupe that got body swapped or something. Because why would a prophet die like that? Why would a prophet let himself die like that when he's all powerful? So yeah, so he's human again. That's kind of the basic overarching decision that the church came up with is codified in the Nicene Creed, is that, well, Jesus is both God and man. He's human so he can die, and he's God so his death means something. And that there's some of the early church fathers talk about, whatever's not assumed isn't saved. That that Jesus has to be fully human whatever that means, because whatever he didn't go through, whatever he isn't necessarily saved. But yeah, good. Any other thoughts on that? Yeah.
Well, because Jesus is both God and man, he has a much closer relationship to humans because he understands what it's like to be human. And, no other, deity in any other religion has had that particular experience.
Yep.
I guess, Muhammad was a human, but he wasn't God.
Right, exactly, yeah.
And Muslims don't
Yep.
revere him as God. So,
Yeah. So, Jesus has to be fully human, so that he can die. So he's God, so that his death means something. We talk about in Hebrews of how Jesus was tempted in every way that we are, yet without sin. That we know, that Jesus weeps. Jesus is sad when Lazarus dies. We know he gets hungry. We know he gets thirsty. We know he gets tired. He gets a little grumpy at his disciples occasionally when they don't quite get anything right. So he goes through all of these things that are, human nature, and just that he experiences all these things, so then he knows what it's like when we go through it. Compared to God, who his spirit doesn't necessarily know that. Yeah, good. All right, and what difference does it make that all three persons of the Trinity are co-equal?
I'm pretty sure it is.
So Father, Son, and Holy Spirit are all God and all equal. Distinct persons, but equal. Why is that important?
one's not more important
Right
than
off
the
the
other.
Yeah, one's not more important than the other. Thanks, Lynn. You got
Each
Jerry?
have their task to do.
They have their tasks to do, right? Yeah, and this is one of the things that trying to understand the Trinity, especially in their interactions within the Trinity, is sometimes beyond our human interactions. So we usually, if we can try and understand the distinct persons better, it's best looking at what they're doing, what their main tasks are. Father, Creator, Redeemer, Sanctifier, kind of what they do. But they're all involved in all of those things too. Yeah.
But the Holy Spirit didn't come until Jesus ascended into heaven.
Well, the Holy Spirit doesn't come down on the disciples until it comes from Him. But the Holy Spirit's been active elsewhere. We talk about when Samson when he has his strength, that's the Spirit of the Lord is upon him, or the Spirit of the Lord's on the prophets and things. So Spirit's still at work in the Old Testament too, but not as visibly as he is after Pentecost. Right, yeah.
The Spirit of the Lord moved upon the waters at creation.
Right, yeah. Those places we see all three persons of the Trinity at work together. Yeah, the Spirit of God hovering over the waters at creation, and the Word being spoken that creates things there. Yep. All three persons present at Jesus' baptism, Jesus getting baptized, his Father speaking from heaven, and the dove descending on him. Yeah.
It's still a mystery.
It's still a mystery, though, right? Yeah, one of those things we take comfort in, that if we could fully understand God, God wouldn't be much of a God. That because we can't fully understand God and His work and His works and His ways, then it reminds us God's God, we're not, and that's comforting at times, frustrating at times, but comforting at times too. All right. So the main conflict, especially this is at the Council of Nicaea, is this debate about Arianism, and it gets pretty heated. There's the apocryphal story that Saint Nicholas of Myra, we know him for other things now in December, but he apparently got in trouble for slugging Arius during a debate at the Council of Nicaea. That he's like, you're a heretic, I'm going to punch you. So So things definitely got a little heated there because of the importance of what they were doing. So that's one of the problems they're dealing with is Arius and his belief. Now, then one problem they've been dealing with since the beginning, there's some allusions to this idea called Gnosticism in even some of the New Testament, some of the letters of John and some other stuff. But so Gnostics, so the Arians believe Jesus is human or a created being and therefore not fully God and subordinate to the Father and all those things. The Gnostics, though, are kind of the other camp. Believe essentially the opposite, that Jesus is God, but only appears to be human. Resurrection shows his true spiritual nature. It's not the resuscitation of a dead body. So Gnostic, it comes from the Greek word gnosis, meaning knowledge. And so kind of the idea is it's, the secret knowledge of, well, here's what, Jesus and the disciples taught the peons, but hey, this is the super secret stuff that Jesus told his disciples that only you know. Same way, conspiracy theories and stuff work today. I know something you don't. I'm smarter than you, and we want to feel that way. So that's kind of what the Gnostics do. And again, so the short summary of Gnosticism is that the material world is evil, spiritual world is good. Only the spiritual stuff is good. So if Jesus is God alone and then not human like we are, what would that mean for our salvation?
Well, then his death wasn't really a death.
Would it have
Well,
been?
Right. Yeah. If Jesus is just God and not human, then he doesn't die. He can't die. All right. And kind of removes that knows what we've gone through part of it, right? Because he was just faking experiencing it.
So it'd be interesting to understand their logic. I mean, they had to know the way he suffered, the way he was scourged, the way he was bleeding to death before he ever got to the cross, and then on the cross. And how did they read that and still?
Well, that it's all he's appearing to go through that it's suffering. And again, and that's just the punishment that our sinful flesh deserves, that our pure spirit being part doesn't. So, and we'll get to here a couple things on how this Gnostic idea kind of we still have to deal with that today too. Yeah, Jeanette.
So are Gnostics and Arians still within?
That's a good. I mean, so there's groups that come up with some similar kinds of these beliefs. I'm trying to remember. I didn't follow all the details. There was a movement in Calvinist Reformed circles that talked about the eternal subordination of the Son. That people accuse those people who believe that of Arianism. And I didn't. I caught glimpses, note mentions of it here and there, but nothing full. And then as we go through, though, we'll look at some beliefs today that might sound pretty similar to the Gnostics, even if they wouldn't have done this, because they didn't have AI yet or computers yet. All right. So again, Gnostics deny the incarnation because they believe the material world is evil. Only the spiritual realm has any value. They pursued gnosis, secret knowledge, to escape the material bonds holding back one's spirit to achieve true spiritual enlightenment. Maybe that definition reminds you of a few modern things, right?
Is that like Hindus?
I mean, so in some of the Buddhist Hindu thought definitely appears that way, that this is a fake world damaged by sin, and the idea is you have to go through reincarnation enough to get your pure spirit being to get out of the cycle that you're trapped in and get to the pure spirit world and become one with God. The Buddhist thoughts and the New Age groups that have taken that. You need to meditate and get your spirit away from ignore your material means body and achieve true enlightenment with your spirit, that kind of thing. So. Yeah, so again, how are these sayings today similar to Gnosticism? Again, that's, spirit good, flesh bad. So can only, if we can get our spirits, get our minds, our soul, whatever, however you describe that, to, just not need to worry about our bodies and our limitations that come with our bodies. How smart could you be if you didn't have to worry about being hungry or thirsty or tired or any of those things? If you were just a brain in a jar, or your consciousness gets uploaded to the web, and you can just be pure intellectual spirit that way. Yeah. So here's a few phrases we can talk about that people will bring about today that reflect some of that Gnostic idea. So I'm spiritual but not religious. Get that a lot. Because, again, all that matters is some spiritual connection and not the religious, the actions of your body. I was born in the wrong body. Again, flesh bad, spirit good. What the spirit is inside me is what matters. And I need to transcend what's... So I can change my body to match what my spirit says it is. We create our own truth. Reality is just a computer simulation. I remember when The Matrix came out when I was in high school, and that idea has been prevalent ever since then.
Was it that long?
I know, wasn't it? Yeah. I keep updating my movie references because all the college kids now have been born since they came out. So
We create our own truth as a little.
yeah.
There's some truth to that.
Oh, yeah. And again, that's always the challenge, is that there's a little that it's not a full blown out lie is so easy to see. It's in that twisted truth, just a little bit of we create our own truth, that we. Our perspective, our senses limit what we can perceive, and so some of what we know as truth is limited by that, and someone else.
Our decisions often have consequences.
Yeah. Yep. All right. What I do with my body has nothing to do with my spiritual identity.
No.
So.
If we have no soul, that probably is true.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Right. Again, that's the idea. Well, and so I could ignore the body comments on on whether it's as minor as tattoos or as big as as drug use or sexual promiscuity or things like that. That okay, I can use my body however I want. Really, the spirit's the only thing that matters. But of course, we know that our bodies affect how our minds and spirits work. We are created beings, with all of those working together. We can't just separate it out as much as we might want to at times. Yeah, Jeanette.
That sounds like a more radical feminist
Okay, yeah.
as well.
That could be, yep.
I look at it as who you hang out with.
Okay, yep,
Especially after you graduate from college.
yeah.
I think that has a lot to do with your spiritual identity, because if you hang out with Christians who go to church
Right.
on Sunday,
Yeah.
you'll probably be doing the same thing. If you hang out with people who don't,
Yep,
your social life is going to be brunch on Sunday.
yep. Right. Yeah, that the physical matters, that, physically being able to, to come together in church. We talk about that some now for the last 5 years, or almost 6 years now, talking about, does online church count as church? And it's one of those, it's a supplement, it's helpful, but it's, not the same as physically coming together and being with other people. There are a couple people talking about, they're taking an OLLI class on body language and how much body language communicates, and how, otherwise sometimes, just words, you can't understand that as much as you can if you're talking to someone in person. You miss those nonverbal cues. And even a video helps with that a little bit, but still not fully. All right. Yeah, here. Someday we can just upload our minds into the internet to get rid of our meat bodies and exist completely in a virtual reality.
Is that what they're calling the singularity or something?
Could be. There's a few different things and names for that.
It's kind of scary.
But yeah, if I can get uploaded into the internet and I'm pictured how I think I should be, and I can make myself look however, in shape or whatever that I want, then wouldn't that be better than having to deal with this stuff I can't control?
Well, one of my Wednesday noon Zooms here a few weeks ago was a guy expert in knowing what's going on out there and cautioning of it. And he said there's some very, very, very serious people working on it very hard and getting very close to they think.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that is scary.
Yeah. Yep. All right. So then, now after that, back to our Lutheran identity, how does the fact that Lutherans emphasize the physical aspects of the sacraments, baptism and Lord's Supper, help combat Gnostic tendencies? So the fact that we use physical stuff and require physical stuff to do some things, how does that help combat Gnostic tendencies?
Brings us to church.
Brings us to church, right? Yeah, you can't do those things by yourself. I mean,
We had Holy Communion in the parking lot.
but still, you still had to physically come and physically receive that, even as we. Yeah, for those of you who weren't around, but one of the ways we handled things during the COVID shutdown was that Pastor Mark and I would have stations outside in the parking lots, and people would sign up for like 15-minute slots, and we'd do communion as a family group or individually, so that there was still that physical contact and physical connection, but also in a safer way than gathering together at that point.
Well, we believe too that the body and blood is the bread and wine.
Right. Yep. Yeah, so you can't receive communion if you don't have that.
You can't do it remotely.
Can't do it remotely, right.
I will say I have a friend who is an Episcopalian, and they had a service at the National Cathedral, and they just showed the elements on,
Yeah.
for a long period of time. That was how they had virtual communion, I guess.
Yeah, I mean,
It's not the same.
which either sometimes, and we'll, in the medieval church, the Roman Catholic Church would have, only the priest would receive the elements, not the normal people, and so again, you just see it, not actually experience it. And there were some attempts to do some different things, and some LCMS churches even, tried and got in a little trouble for trying to do kind of a virtual communion of we'll send out the bread and the wine to you, or the church supply companies for some other denominations have the little kind of shot glass with the wafer on top and things, and the idea was that the consecration would happen, that when the online service got to the point of the consecration, that the consecration could make it through the screen and stuff to do that. And then the CTCR, the Commission on Theology and Church Relations, said, yeah, that really doesn't work. There needs to be physically present to do that. So again, but again, there was kind of an attempt of how can we do this with all these people, when we can't meet together. So, but yeah. So again, the fact that we have physical stuff, and if you remember, and I'm starting to go over sacraments with the confirmation kids, definition of the Lutheran definition of a sacrament is that it's something instituted by Christ, gives forgiveness, and has a physical element. That's why we talk about only these 2 sacraments instead of the 7 that Catholics have, and some Lutherans will talk about maybe confession and absolution being a 3rd sacrament, but the catch is it doesn't have a distinct physical element to it. For those who argue that it does say the physical element is the 2 people, the confessor and the absolver, so that's the physical element to it. But like, you can't have a baptism without water, can't have communion without bread and wine. And again, so that kind of helps combat those Gnostic ideas. All right, any other thoughts on that?
Well, this is kind of what we've been talking about. Recently, I was listening to something online, and I think it was an ELCA church. And they said, okay, for those of you watching us online, we're going to do communion now. If you want to go get some bread and some wine. And
Yep.
But we're saying that really isn't
No.
kosher.
Right. Yep.
I just thought it was interesting. I thought, really? Okay.
Yeah. And I mean, and there's been different things to deal with that, because before the pandemic, the only main thing they dealt with, the CCR had dealt with, was people doing it kind of before you could stream live on the internet, but someone would mail a DVD of a service, and what does the pastor speaking the words of institution on the pre-recorded DVD? Does that count as consecration? No, but you had, bigger churches are dealing with lots of shut-ins or things trying to make that work, and so similar idea with the once you have live streaming, and so even though it's happening at the same time, essentially it's still, because it's not in the same physical place, it doesn't quite work. Yeah, Connie.
I had a pastor who was a good friend in Boston, and he did not believe you could have communion with regular bread, that it needed to be unleavened bread, because
Yep.
that was the tradition, the
Yep.
Jewish tradition. You do not have leavened bread.
Yep,
Yeah. During Passover.
Right. So which elements do you use, and can it be? And yeah, generally we use, it has to be unleavened bread, it has to be wine, grape wine, and so there's various, how picky do you get on things? Can you make, because there's some churches that make unleavened bread, bread loaves that do that because they don't like the wafers. And I think I had a theology professor in college who said it takes more faith to believe the wafers are bread than it does to believe they're the body of Christ. And then debate over whether it has to be wine. I still remember I sat in on one of the National Synodical Conventions, because it was in St. Louis and we were there for seminary. So let's go watch this and see what happens, and hope our hearts don't break by watching all the sausage get made. But in any case, there was a debate over, something about that it, has to be fruit of the vine. And then some layperson comes and asks, well, fruit of the vine, does that mean we can make watermelon wine and use it? And some seminary professor had to come up and say, no, that doesn't work. It's fruit of the vine means grapes. And so it has to be wine. And there's even some debate, over for the non-alcoholic option. Does it have to be wine with alcohol removed, or does it have to have at least like a drop of wine in it and things? And so you can get really nitpicky on some of those things. But again, based on Jesus instituted this during the Passover, what were they using during the Passover? So we use those same things. Yeah.
Does it have to be red wine or can it be white wine?
No, it can be white wine. Good question, though. It doesn't have to be Mogan David either, as much as it. But yeah, I mean, so it has to be wine, the specific type and color of wine. I mean, usually churches will use red wine because it looks like blood. I think is at least part of it. I think there was a stretch where the Catholics said you have to use red wine, so Lutherans started using white wine because once you start telling us what we can and can't do, that's when we get stubborn. But
the wine here comes from a company that makes communion.
right, yeah, I mean, the wine we get, and yeah, I don't remember where it is. It's somewhere in Northeast Iowa, I think, and and that's their business, is they make wine for churches that do communion. So.
Because in Boston, we have white wines.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. I know my vicarage church had a member who owned a liquor store, and so he always provided the wine, but I don't remember what for sure kind of wine he did. But yeah, Norm.
Yeah, looking back just a little to the perception of reality, it's frightening how many people regard the relationship with a chatbot as their
Right.
friend.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. If you pure spiritual beings of intellect, well, yeah, that's computer programs, right? And so, yeah, if you're able to, yeah, if your interactions with a chatbot now are, well, I don't need to go, physically see a counselor. I'll just talk to the chatbot about my feelings, and not thinking that, how do these chatbots get their knowledge? And so, I mean, a lot of the AI stuff is their tech. What was it? It's LLM, like large language model or something, and they essentially scoop everything they can off the internet without checking to see whether it's true or false or not, and then combine it all in a database, and that the AI thing can look at and go through. And so it's not going to necessarily keep track, respond truthfully or accurately. I mean, you can be good about restricting its answers to answer this in the way that something would, to help restrict help some of that. But it's a challenge. Yeah, that's not always accurate, not always helpful. And again, speaks to some of that idea of that we see an increase in anxiety and loneliness in younger people, and part of it is that we have all these virtual relationships and not physical relationships, and you need to be able to have that. All right. So to deal with these controversies, Gnostics, Arians, and other groups, so Constantine called the council at Nicaea in 325 AD to define the Christian position. Created a statement that made clear the difference between orthodoxy. So we often hear, so orthodoxy means right opinion, right worship, right belief. And then heresy, which comes from the Greek word that means to choose for oneself. So are you following the right worship, right practice, right beliefs, or are you choosing for yourself? The difference between orthodoxy and heresy.
Is that where the punching occurs?
Yeah, this is where the punching occurs. Yep. All right. So, yep. And then, I didn't print the whole thing out here, but since we're meeting in here, you've got hymnals in front of you. And you can, inside back cover is the easiest place to look at it, but it's a bunch of places. So look at the Nicene Creed and see if you can find some phrases that either defy Arianism or defy Gnosticism. And as you look at it and go through it, when you find a phrase like that, let me know. Raise your hand. Very God, very God, right. So is Jesus just human? No, he's very God. Good.
The only begotten Son.
Only begotten Son, yep.
Well, he came down from heaven, was incarnate, the Holy Spirit of the Virgin Mary, and made man.
Yep, so he's incarnate, made born of the Virgin Mary, made man.
Suffered and was buried.
Suffered and buried, right?
Crucified under Pontius Pilate.
Yeah.
And third day rose again.
Yeah.
Sits at the right hand of God, of the Father.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember since I was in the seminary, as they were working on the hymnal, they talked about, oh yeah, we put the creeds in the Lord's Prayer right in the inside back cover so people can find it right away. And then the next page inside is the holy baptism in case of emergency. So you're not, in the other hymnals, it's buried in the middle somewhere. And oh, I'm in an emergency. I have a hymnal, but how do I baptize? Shoot, where is it? Well, it's just on the inside. So.
I know a woman who was a nurse, actually the wife of the pastor who thought you had to have unleavened bread. And I think it was in a Lutheran hospital, and she was in the OB/GYN department, and they used to baptize babies that were at risk.
Yep.
The nurses did it.
Yeah, I mean, we've gotten called out a couple times. We ended up not having to because they were well enough, but you know, when kids are born in the ICU right away. So, and my parents think I might have been baptized in the hospital. They're not sure, but there was at least at one point I was born 6 weeks premature, and so was and they think that at least one of the nurses or probably baptized me before I got shipped around, and then obviously did well enough and recovered and was able to be baptized in a church that we knew about then later. But, all right. Any other thoughts on the Nicene Creed there?
He suffered and was buried, but he rose again.
Suffered, buried, rose again. Right. And so, and again, when we look at the resurrection accounts, we can tell that it's the gospel writers are taking pains to make sure that Jesus isn't just a spirit, isn't just a ghost, but is showing us stuff. We get most famously, of course, with Thomas. Look, you could put your hand in my, in the holes of my hand and the holes of my side. So so that way. But Jesus also he eats a fish with his disciples. Ghost spirits don't eat fish. They don't eat it all. I mean, except for, again, Slimer from Ghostbusters eats, but most of the other time ghosts don't. And then it talks about how they fall down at his feet. And, in Greek culture, ghosts don't have feet. And even in our culture, the ghost floating over things, there tends not to have feet. So to prove that this is Jesus with a physical body, not in a resurrected body, not just some spirit being that looks like him. Yeah, Connie.
Wasn't this particular council where the Orthodox Church went off kind of?
No, that's later on. Well, although there's the debate. So if you're looking at that, the two things are so being of one substance with the Father is also one of the big ideas, because that was part of it was that if Jesus is a created being, then is God are they both divine but different substances? And there's debate over, and there's one letter difference in Greek of whether same substance or similar substance. And they said same substance. They're both God. But so yeah, and then one of the issues that pops up later on is that the Orthodox don't go along with the idea that the Spirit proceeds from the Father and the Son, but only that proceeds from the Father. And by that point, there's other things going on. Eastern Church is mostly speaking Greek. Western Church is mostly dealing with Latin. Instead of all 5 bishops, being co-equal, Pope said he's more equal than others. First one, you have the 2 different capitals. There's some political machinations going on too, and so it's all a mess. And the filioque and the Son bit is used as an excuse, but isn't the full reason for the split. But yeah. All right. Why is it helpful to think of yourself and your church as being connected with the early church?
I'm grateful they did all they did.
Right.
I am grateful for all that they did in determining, just like the Nicene Creed, it was, a man-made thing, but they had a lot of arguments over what to have, and we have it.
Right. Yeah. They were able to have these arguments and figure things out so that we don't have to. Good. Anything else?
Well, they were closer to the beginning when Christ was there, and so they had more of the facts available.
Okay. I mean, yeah. In some ways, they had more of the facts. They're closer to Jesus. I mean, you had John taught, Irenaeus taught, Polycarp taught, all these people leading to some of these bishops in the 3rd century, or 3rd and 4th century. So yeah. that's going on, and that's helpful. Good. Anything else? So again, then the early church survived cultural hostility, and this was more, I think we talked more about this last week, but especially pre-Constantine, the Christians had to deal with not constant persecution, but the constant threat of persecution at least. So dealt with cultural hostility far worse than most Christians experience today, and the early church even converted persecutors. Of course, most famous of those is the Apostle Paul. We have other aspects of that too, of that as Christians are going to get martyred, tossed to the lions in the Colosseum or something, how they're facing their death, how their faith is showing even in this, kind of reflects on some of those who are around them. And then there's a couple stories about like some of the soldiers who are supposed to be executing the Christians end up getting executed alongside the Christians because they refuse to do it once they see this example of faith and hope and things. So what does that, though, tell us about the prospects for today's church? So here are all sorts of challenges and problems. Church is shrinking, losing its cultural identity, cultural power. So what does looking back at the early church tell us about the church today and our prospects? Yeah, Jeanette?
Well, I don't think God's ever going to let go.
Yeah.
He's with us as we struggle with whatever, but ultimately I think he's going to win. I know he's going to win.
Yeah. So he's with us like he was with the early church. They went through all sorts of struggles, and so we know Jesus is with us in our struggles. Anything else?
I think we need to pray that the church will remain, and that those things that lead people away from the church or makes it seem irrelevant or whatever, that we don't emphasize those things, but we emphasize the truth of, our salvation is won by Christ. And consider the people we hang out with.
His word goes out and will not return void.
His word goes out and will not return void or empty. Right, yep. Accomplishes it in due season. So due season might not be on our timing, but I don't know. Have you figured out how to get your crops to grow right exactly when you want them to, Alan, yet? Just stare at the corn, tell it, okay, time to come up, and doesn't quite work. Right. So God's time. Virtual reality. Right. If you're got a virtual reality farm, you can click fast forward and make it grow. Right. Yeah. Good. Yeah. God's timing's not ours, and that's a good thing.
I was thinking a little bit about your previous question.
Yeah.
Why does it help to think yourself about connected to the early? Because they did hash it all out, and of course, the way we're visiting about it today, it sounds like they got it right. And so that's what we are.
Right.
We aren't sitting here and saying like, yeah, we took a little of this one, we took a little of that one, we took, I got this whole new thing. And no, we're
right.
totally in line with the conclusion they came to, which appears to be right.
The physical presence of church is very important. And being involved in it.
Yep. Yeah, even secular researchers will talk about the importance of being connected to a community, physically going to church and being involved in that, and different health benefits they measure in a variety of different ways. So yeah, good. All right, well, we'll stop there, and we'll do, 2 weeks we'll do the Dark Ages, because next week is Mission Sunday. And so we'll just join in with the kids as we do a video call with the Grolkes in Botswana. So we won't meet in here for that next week. We'll meet in the student center. Just easier to have things set up for the video call there, and with all the kids running around and coming in and going. So then we'll start with the Dark Ages stuff in 2 weeks. All right. Thank you all for coming.